classes? I remember what age she said. What age is it? 6 and down. Ages 6 and down, you've got a class at 2, so just follow the crew on their way out.
5th grade and down.
5th grade and down. 5th grade and down, you got a class if you want to go to it. He was getting it. Man. I hope y'all are that excited to be in class this morning. If you've got your Bibles, go ahead and be opening them up to Acts chapter 4. Acts chapter 4. When we ask ourselves a few different things about where we want to be spiritually, what do we want for ourselves, what do we want for our families, what do we want for the people around us, it's easy to look around the world and to see examples of things to compare. And I think it's ironic, you bring up Grand Canyon stuff, of how do you describe something that is here in this world? How much harder is it to describe something that is not of this world? And the challenges that are there. And I think about June 10th, I don't know how many people are excited that Jurassic Park has another movie coming out. And if you remember, how many people have seen the original Jurassic Park movies? All right, so when there's ripples in a cup of water, what does that mean? I mean, something big's coming, something that's going to make an impact. All right, so remember that. Don't forget it, because you're going to see that again on June 10th. And we get a little further up, and we go all the way out to where David is. David's first time on the scene. I'm going to recount the story just real briefly before we get into Acts chapter 4. So David is a young guy, and he's wanting to go out. He's wanting to do great things. He's watching sheep. There's a guy coming around. He's going to anoint someone as the next king over Israel. Do you remember the guy that's supposed to come anoint the next king? What his name is? Samuel. Samuel's traveling. He gets to the household of Jesse. He gets there with the horn. He's going to anoint someone. He says, I need to meet your son. So what's Jesse do? He goes out and gets his sons. He starts with the oldest because, he's the oldest. He's the most well-developed. He's, whatever it may be, whether it's the inheritance, whether he had good looks, whether he was just built like a tank, whatever it was, the first guy in line is the oldest. And so he says, no, that's not him. And he passes by, and they keep going. Where was David? What if someone comes to your house? Let's say we're at the Tips home, and we'll have all your boys here. Let's say somebody comes to your house, and they're going to anoint the next president of the United States. And your dad, Carson, says, hey, come over here, Carson. It's got to be him, It's got to be. Look at him. He's got that green. He's got that hair. It's got to be this guy. And they say, no, it's not him. Let's say all the way down to the youngest. Y'all are left out in the yard. Y'all are picking up pine needles because you're in southern Mississippi. That's all you got to do is pick up pine needles. And everybody starts passing through. How do you feel sitting out there picking pine needles up? You're not even in line to find out if you might be the next king. You're not even in the line. Nobody has come to get you. All of your brothers are over there in a line finding out who's going to be the next great thing, and you're out here picking up pine needles. Imagine being David, and then when they finally do come to get him, they say, hey, David, Dad needs you. You need you to come. Well, what do you want me over there for? Well, they've been trying to figure out who they're going to anoint to be the next king. Well, why didn't you come get me first? Did you not think enough of me? Did you think just because I was young that I wasn't going to be that guy? You put everybody in our household before me to find out if they were going to be the next king. So David, from the very moment that we even meet him as an individual in the scriptures, has a mental battle that he's got to overcome. He can't worry about what's going on with everyone else. He can't let it get in his mind whether he's good enough, whether he's less than, why did I get left out in the field, what's the reason? And he can't get so aggressive that he wants to be in that group that he abandons his job of tending the sheep, because that creates even more problems. So we fast forward a little bit. We get a little further down. Once we get past David being anointed as the king, David then, what does he do from that point forward? For the next few years, what's David doing after being anointed? Remember? He's still keeping sheep. You're anointed to be the next king, and then you're put right back out in the pasture. And all your brothers are going off to war. That's what kings do. Kings go off to war. He's got all these soldiers that are going out. He's got brothers that are leaving. And he's still back in the field tending the sheep. And his dad tells him, he says, son, I need you to go check on your brothers. Now, you're anointed to be the next king. And your dad says, I want you to go serve. I want you to go do what I asked you to do. Go check on somebody. How many of us, all of us guys, how many of us struggled when our parents asked us to do something that we didn't really want to do? How many of us struggled with that? Why do I have to do that? The thing about David is he's anointed to be the next king. And when his dad asked him to do something, he just did it. Dad, why can't you go yourself? Dad, we got other brothers. Why don't you send one of them? Dad, I'm supposed to be the next king. I'm supposed to be important. I'm out here still with the sheep. I am sick of this. I don't want to do this anymore. And yet David gathers his stuff up and starts heading out to that battle. He gets there and he hears Goliath across and he's making all these threats and all these accusations. And what do his brothers tell him? Do you remember?
What are you doing here? Who's keeping the sheep?
Well, they don't start with the who's keeping the sheep. They start with I know you and your pride. I know how you act. You're not even fit to be here. You ever had somebody try to belittle you to the point that they were trying to just bring you down to where you wouldn't do something that you knew you could do? All right, so battle number 2, because David's in war before he ever faces Goliath. At home, he's the last one to be seen as possibly being a king. When he gets there to check on his brothers, even though he's anointed to be the king, he's still honoring his father by doing the request that his dad asked. He could have said, Dad, he has an entire army to look after him. Our brothers have the king watching over him. Why do I have to go check? Doesn't matter why, David. You know what your dad asked you to do. And David went to do it. And when he gets there, he sits there and he starts talking to his brothers, and they start running down. Anybody in your life has your back to encourage you. Who should it be? Your family. If you can count on anybody, I hope that your home is a place you can go to know that they want what's best for you. And yet here's his brothers just running, what are you even doing here? And to top that off, like Willie was saying, when he finally says, what have I done now? I'm not here with the calls. They're saying, you know what, your little petty job over there? Yeah, some king you turned out to be. What about those few sheep you left in the wilderness? Let me ask you, what does the next 24 hours look like if David lets that get into his head? What does the next 24 hours look like if David lets that get into his head?
More cussing to God's army day and night.
A lot more cussing in God's army day and night.
Well, Goliath came out and challenged him every day, and he was defying God. He said, who's this uncircumcised Philistine that defies the living God? That he was cursing God, Goliath was, every time he would step out on the battlefield to challenge his people.
Imagine how negative David would feel if he believes what his brothers are saying. Yeah, I'm just some arrogant little kid with just a few sheep. I don't really matter. Imagine how he's going to, he's probably not going to go to King Saul. He'll probably slinker off to the side and just be like, just forget it. It's not even worth it. You guys just let Goliath run y'all over. I'm going home. Forget it. I might even take my cheeses and stuff and go, and I'll leave them on the way back to the house. And I'm going to tell Dad, you guys are okay. You're just jerks. Imagine if that's how he reacts. But no. David steps up, goes to King Saul. He says, I want to take this on. Here's my qualifications. The next thing that happens, Saul puts something on him. What's he put on him? Armor. What's he do with it? Do what? Why?
I've not proven myself for these things.
So I haven't tested this stuff out. Imagine being a shepherd. You're fixing to go into the biggest battle of your life. You're given a king's armor. You know how cool he probably felt? How much pride could have swelled up in him just immediately? Oh, look at me. I don't even have the sling no more. I got the sword, I got the shield, I've got the chainmail. I've got everything. Look at what I've got. How many people in today's living get that way? They get the first paycheck and, hey, I got money. Look at me. I don't even have to listen to nobody else anymore. I'll take care of myself. Look what I've got. David could let that be his mindset. Look, I've got all this fancy stuff. I'm about to walk out there in a real fight. I look good. But no, it's not him. This wasn't fit for him. It wasn't made for him. This is not who David is. He hasn't tested this stuff. So he takes it off and he says, you know what I've got to do? I've got to stay true to who I am. What does David go and retrieve? Why? Why does he go get stones? That's who David is. That's who David is. When we start wanting to reach the world and evangelize, when we have friends that are lost that we want to see come to know Christ, you've got a couple things that you've got to overcome from the get-go. You got to keep the world and all the people's opinions out of your head. No matter how close you are to somebody, you got to keep their thoughts and their opinions out of your mind. Because if David allows what happened at the day that he was anointed king, if he allows what his brother said, if he allows what the rest of the army says, if he allows what Saul said, if he allows those things in his mind, he won't be fit to be on that battlefield with Goliath. He will not defeat Goliath if he can't overcome the mental battles that he has. And secondly, he can't be somebody that he's not. Just the same as today, you and me, If you act fake, they're going to see right through you. If you're a worldly person one moment and you try to act like a godly person the next, they're going to see right through you. And there is going to be no ability to reach those who are lost because it'll go right out the window. So 2 things to keep in mind as we start through this journey of Scripture together. 1, you've got to be who you are at all times. Don't be somebody else because you weren't created to be somebody else. And secondly, you've got to keep the world out of your mind because God's Word is what was designed to be put on our hearts, not the world's opinion. No matter how close someone is to you, there will always be things that will challenge you. So Acts chapter 4 is where we are. We're going to jump down to verse number 13. We get a scenario here that has to do with Paul and John. Some things that happen with them being put into a jail. I think I'm in the wrong spot. Peter and John. Yeah, Acts chapter 4, verse 13. It says, now as they observed the confidence of Peter and John and understood that they were uneducated and untrained men, they were amazed and began to recognize them as having been with Jesus. Let's pause for a second.
Amen.
These people recognize something. What is it they recognize? You can cheat. You can look in your Bibles. What's it say? Well, what do they recognize about it?
Uneducated.
That's not what they recognized. They knew they were uneducated. Just you spend much time around me, you'll figure out I'm uneducated real quickly. They realize what about them? They realized they've been with Jesus. How did they know that?
From the way they spoke.
From the way they spoke?
They were learned men.
These guys they weren't acting like everybody else. They weren't talking about the same things as everybody else. They weren't doing the same things as everybody else. All the way back in the book of Joshua, Joshua was going to make a comment. He's going to say, as for me and my what? Now, he doesn't say, as for me and my outward ministry. He says, for me and my house. What are they going to do?
Serve the Lord.
What is normal in your house? And that's a question let that be rhetorical. What is normal in your home? What Joshua is saying is what is going to be normal in our house is service to God. He's not saying just the stuff that he does as he goes out. He's not saying just the stuff that he does evangelistically for others. He says the evangelism in his home. That as for me and my house, what we're going to be normal. What is normal in our house is we're going to pray together. What is normal in our house is we're going to praise God together. What is normal in our house is we're going to know the Scriptures together. You've got to ask yourself this entire week, as you prepare to go home and as you prepare for this next 5 to 7 days of what you're going to do when you get back home, what do you want to be normal in your home? Because guys, we can lead our homes. Whether you're the youngest, David was the youngest in a line of guys that nobody thought was fixing to be king, and he has the biggest impact on his family of anybody. Or whether you're the husband and the father that is in a house, it is your decision, man, how your home is going to be led. Whether it's just you and your wife, or whether it's you, your wife, and your kids, or whatever your situation may be, what will be normal in your home? Because people will recognize you when you're not being fake trying to be someone else, and when you're not trying to allow the world's opinions to be what leads you. Just like David had to keep his brother's thoughts and their words out of his mind, and he had to be able to go in and say, I am who I am, and it's up to me to continue to be that person. Here's Peter and John, and they recognize they've been with Jesus. What does the world recognize about you? What do they see in each one of us? And what is going to be normal in our houses? Let's keep going. Somebody read verse number 14 for us.
Seeing the man who had been healed standing with him, they could say nothing against it.
Okay, so they see this guy that's with them, and they've got nothing negative to say. They don't have anything to put against it, because when they realized they're uneducated and untrained, they were amazed, and they began to recognize that they had been with Jesus, and they noticed that somebody's been healed. So something's going on, somebody's okay. Verse 15, but when they had ordered them to leave the council, they began to confer with one another, saying, what shall we do with these men? Let's be as clear as we can. When you live a life for God, and when you live a life separated from the world's not going to know what to do with you. God's people were created to lead. That's what the Great Commission is about. He says, go unto all the world and do what?
Preach the gospel to every creature.
If we can abbreviate and shorten that, and I think very simply put, he says, go out there and lead people to Christ. God's people were created to lead. So when the world doesn't know what to do with you, that considers them as lost. If I don't know where I'm going, if I don't know what I'm doing, I'm lost. And what is someone when they don't know the gospel? They're lost. And so right here in this moment, we've got a perfect parallel. He's saying that some guys were different. They were noticed to be different. It was clear they had been with Jesus. And then at this point in time, what are we going to do with these guys? We've got them all chained up. They're bound up. We've got them in this. But what do we do with them? Should we turn them loose? Should we keep them? The world's asking the same thing about the church today. And they're challenging the church at every corner. All the time. Whether it's on TV, whether it's through the billboards you passed as you drove here, whether it's the street signs, whether it's the people that are out in the community, whether it's the people in your own home. If you are an individual who is trying to live their life to be a faithful one, you will be challenged. You will be challenged. Are you ready for that challenge? Because that's going to be something you've got to prepare yourself spiritually for. Verse number 16 tells us what shall we do with these men? For the fact that a noteworthy miracle has taken place through them is apparent to all who live in Jerusalem, and we can't deny it. Guys, there's something different about them, and it's a good thing, but we've got a problem with it. What does 2022 look like? So many people that attack the church, they've got a good thing going, but we don't really like the fact that they've got a good thing going. And so everybody wants their own good thing, and they want their own good thing to be different than somebody else's good thing. And everybody starts attacking and grabbing at what they want for themselves, and it's never coming back to where it should have been. And unfortunately, the church has a lot of individuals that are trying to say, yeah, that's okay, we'll go with them. What are we going to do about it? That's where evangelism kicks in. We see and we can say, if I asked you this morning, can you name every problem within the church that you can think of? How long do you think that list would be? I mean, every one of us would have our own, I don't like this, I don't like that, and this is an issue, and this isn't scriptural, and this isn't that way. What are we going to do about it? It is so easy to make a list of complaints and a list of things that we don't agree with, but God gave you your talent to find solutions to help those who are lost to come to know Him, to find that grace, to know the gospel, to be able to say that I've been converted because of God's word. What are we going to do about those problems? So we get a little further in, verse number 17. Somebody read 17 for us.
But in order that it may spread no further among the people, let us warn them to speak no more to anyone in His name. In this name. What do they decide they're going to do?
Censor.
We're going to censor them. We're going to tell you what you can and can't. This is 2022, right? I mean, I think that's when the book of Acts was written. It's 2022. They're trying to censor down what people are going to say. Elon Musk is going to buy Twitter. Somebody's going to get mad because of how Donald Trump used Twitter. You get on there and you put something about faith and they're going to block it because it goes against Facebook's standards. All these things, we're trying to censor it down to where we can only let the people hear what we want them to hear. That's what these guys are doing. We don't want Peter and John going back out there and saying that we arrested them for no reason, and we don't want them talking about this Jesus anymore. We don't want them doing good things anymore because then they look good and the government looks bad. So let's just censor it down and say, guys, you're not allowed to talk about it. We're going to keep you quiet. Let me ask this question. What will you do when the world tries to get you to stay quiet? If you aren't ready to answer that question, you need to start working on your plan. Because without a plan, you're going to perish. Where there is no vision, the people perish. That comes right out of the book of Proverbs. And if we say that, I don't want this to happen, but we don't figure out what we're going to do when it does happen, it's too late. How many times, and this is something, when I was a kid, I remember with my dad and my mom, we would go in the theater and certain words would come across the screen of the movie we were watching that we didn't know certain words were going to be in. And I remember a few different movies that we just got up and walked out of. That's money wasted. That's literally taking dollar bills and throwing them down the gutter. But we weren't going to stay for something that we didn't agree with. Now, if we didn't have a plan, if we didn't walk in that theater saying, no, we're not the kind of people that want to hear this, then we just sat there and watched the rest of the movie and just counted how many more words we heard. But we got up and left for what reason? Because we had an idea of what we didn't want to be around. We already knew what we didn't want to hear. We already knew what we did not want to be influenced by. And so we were prepared to do what we had to do when the time came. When someone challenges you to abandon your faith, when they try to let me ask you this too, because we got a lot of young guys here. How many of y'all have Spotify or Pandora or anything like that? How many of y'all got a subscription to that? What's on your playlist? That matters.
Amen.
You think that doesn't matter to God? Just because you say I can go into a weight room and listen to it and that's what motivates me? If you're being motivated by trash, it'll be just that way the rest of your life. You'll be motivated by trash the rest of your life. Can you discipline yourself to make sure that those things aren't what's influencing you? Have you disciplined yourself and said, look, even though I really, really want this, have you gotten spiritually to a point you're spiritually strong enough to say no when you need to say no to whatever it may be? So as we look at these verses, they say we're going to try to censor them down. We're going to make them be quiet about the things we don't want them saying. And we're going to tell them you can talk about anything you want to as long as it's what we agree with. That's not going to work. Peter and John aren't going to be okay with that. If we know anything about them, we know they're not. Somebody read verses 18 and 19 for us.
And they called them and commanded them not to speak at all, nor teach in the name of Jesus. But Peter and John answered and said unto them, whether it be right in the sight of God to hearken unto you more than unto God, judge ye.
Somebody summarize. What are they saying?
They left it in the hands of the guards. It's you judge it.
If what I'm doing is wrong,
Are you more important than God? You get to judge that.
if what I'm doing is wrong, then we need to have a conversation because you don't understand right and wrong. What they're doing is he is literally saying, if you believe, you need to check with God before you tell me what to and not to say. Where do we get our authority from?
True.
So when we want to go out and be evangelistic and somebody says, shh, you can't talk about that, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? One of the teachers, and that's one thing that I liked about Prosper a lot, where we're at now, where our kids go to school. One of the teachers there, she's a person of faith, and you're not allowed to talk about the Bible and God in school unless somebody asks. So the teacher says, well, kids, I want y'all to know you're not allowed to talk about religious things unless you guys ask. Just in case y'all think we forget something, just ask me if we're forgetting something, maybe prayer or something. So one of the little kids, especially in McKinley's class, raise their hand. Are we forgetting something? Oh yeah, our prayer before the meal. Would someone like to say it? And one of the little boys will stand up and lead a prayer before they go to their lunch. But they've got to ask. And so she opens that door so they have an opportunity to decide for themselves what direction am I taking. Now that's a big influence on what comes from home, whether they're going to know what she's talking about or not. We have to lead our homes because all the way down to pre-K where my 5-year-old little girl is, she's being influenced by the people in the room with her. And when they stand up and say we're forgetting something, we need to pray. My 5-year-old little girl is being influenced based on the way someone else's parents are raising their kids. You think that doesn't matter? How petty the time is, it seems like when we've got little bitty kids. And how we feel like, oh man, I don't know if I want to play tic-tac-toe anymore. I don't know if I want to do this little game with them. It seems like such a kiddish thing. That is developing them. So guys, whether you're 10 years old, whether you're 18 years old, whether you're 85 years old, we've got to start branching across some generations and having an impact. And having an influence. Because where do we learn the tough lessons? We learn that from the guys that have been through them. And the 5-year-old hasn't been through the tough times yet, but they've got to learn from the ones who have. What are we going to do about it? All right, so when they get to this point, they say, guys, we want you to decide. If it's what we're doing wrong, you've got to decide that for yourself. Verse number 20. Somebody read 20 and 21.
For we cannot stop speaking what we have seen and heard. And when they had threatened them further, they let them go, finding no basis on which they might punish them on account of the people, because they were all glorifying God for what had happened.
Okay, so the first couple words in that verse is their solution. What are they going to do? What is Peter going to tell them? This is what we're going to do. He says, we're not going to quit talking. Man, you can try. You can try. But if there is anything that I can't stop talking about, it's Jesus. Have we reached that point in our life yet? If I had to ask your friends, I'm not talking about you specifically, I'm asking your friends. Let's say it's Chisholm that we're talking about. Now I went to all of Chisholm's friends. Hey guys, what's the one thing that Chisholm can't stop talking about? Guys, he's a huge Avengers fan. He knows that Iron Man was the greatest Avenger of all time, and that's all he ever talks about. Maybe I go to Jonathan and I ask all of Jonathan's buddies, what is the one thing Jonathan can't quit talking about? Roll Tide. Apparently he was born too far south. Something weird went wrong with him. And he just rolled Tide, which Jonathan doesn't really care that much. He just picks on people about it. But if I asked his friend, what's the one thing he can't quit talking about? And they said, Roll Tide. That's all he talks about. Maybe I go over there to Pepe and I say, what's the one thing, guys? What's the one thing Pepe can't quit talking about? He can't quit talking about his job, how he doesn't like it, but he does like it. Sometimes this job, it's always work with him. The only thing he talks about is work. What's the world seeing about people that are supposed to be Christ-like? That we're so caught up in our jobs, our sports teams, and our entertainment that they didn't hear Jesus. That's a problem. I got to tell you about my athleticism. I got to tell you about my entertainment. I got to tell you about how much I work. I got to tell you about this and that. These guys made one statement. What can they not stop talking about? What was it? Jesus. That's when we start to change the world. You want to see the world turned upside down. You want to see friends that are lost come to know Christ? Talk to them about Christ, not about the job. Now maybe the job opens a door. Maybe the job is an opportunity to start a conversation. But the purpose of why we have what we have, the reason we have athleticism, the reason we have the job we have, the reason we've got the sports team, the reason we've got the entertainment is to be used for God's glory. To be able to open doors of opportunity to spread the gospel. So these guys come in and they say, dude, we're going to threaten you. You keep doing this, you're going to end up right back in this prison. You're not going to be cool. You're not going to be popular. You're going to be a loser. People are going to pick on you and make fun of you. And I hope that you're weak and you can't handle being made fun of because I want to shut you down. That's what Satan's saying. I hope that you mentally and emotionally are weak. And I hope you can't talk about Jesus because people are going to run you down for it. Because we're stronger than that. God created us to be stronger than that. So what are we going to do when the world's pressure gets on us? Guys, we buck against that. We are not going to allow that. One thing we cannot do. We cannot allow ourselves to bow down to Satan. And Satan's got control of a lot of people. And that means we can't let ourselves bow down to those people either. When it comes to what they said and they make that statement, and he says, what are they going to do? In verse number 21, when they had threatened them further, they let them go, finding no basis on which to punish them. These guys had a clear conscience. They had done nothing wrong, and the world knew it. They were trying to run them down, but they knew there was nothing they could actually do because these guys had already overcome that. When they hanged Jesus on a cross, what could they walk around saying Jesus was guilty of? Nothing. And they knew it. And then Acts 2 gets its authority because Jesus was an innocent man. And here we are today because of that very reason. Will you live your life as an innocent individual? As we get into verse number 22, the very end of all this, somebody read verse number 22 for us.
For the man was over 40 years old of whom his miracle of healing had been performed.
What does that have to do with anything?
A lot.
What?
I mean, this poor guy, he'd been paralyzed since before Jesus had entered the womb in Mary's belly. So you think about this guy, and so evidence for his whole life. For Christ was alive for 33 years. This guy has been paralyzed for 7 more years than that. And you think about everybody knew who this guy was. And so therefore everybody knew his struggle, and now everybody saw him healed. It's a powerful thing.
It wasn't just a twisted ankle and then, by the next morning he was walking again. And that had to be a miracle. No, guys, he just healed up overnight because he needed to stretch that thing out. It wasn't like Israel last year. Apparently, walking. It was a torn ACL or something you had. What was it that he had? Yeah, torn ACL. Last year at camp, he had a torn ACL. We didn't know it. No wonder it was a little bit faster than he was because he had a torn ACL. It was a miracle. No, this guy had been 40 years, not just a week, not just a day. This guy's entire reputation was following the lines of everybody knew he had a problem. And all that was immediately changed. Guys, we can't change that. We can't deny that. You study anything about our God and about Jesus, the world can't deny it. The Bible does not carry lies, it carries facts. Robert Tips taught a lesson, and he did it here last year, and then he did it at Minister League Experience as well. It's one I want to hear again and again and again, about how much evidence there is that this is as much of a historically correct book as anything. And you can prove so many things using the Bible that are accurate. And when you reach a point that you can't deny something, you've got to decide, what am I going to do with it? That's what evangelism is about. Teaching someone the facts that God gave us to the point they have to decide, what am I going to do with it? When I realize there's a God, when I realize this is His Word, when I know what He's instructed of me, when I know what temptation is about, what am I going to do with that? And that's where the church gets stronger. And iron starts to sharpen iron. And we help one another. We lead one another. We strengthen one another. That's why we're here this week. We're going to strengthen one another. We're going to get together in a way that when we go out into that world, we can turn it upside down. If a couple guys can do that in town and be known as guys that turn the world upside down, how much more can the 60 men that are going to be here this week do? How much more can the congregation that's here at Little Mountain all throughout the year do in Winchester and turn the world upside down if we will just simply make the decision that I'm going to do whatever it takes at all costs to spread the gospel and live out the Great Commission. Verse 23, when they had been released, so these guys are free. You get to go what you want to do. Saturday at 3 o'clock, you're going to be set free. You won't be locked up with us anymore in a smelly cabin. They went to their own companions and reported to all the chief priests and all the elders that had said to them. And when they heard this, they lifted their voices to God with one accord and said, somebody read for us what they said.
Lord, thou art God, which hast made heaven and earth and the sea, and all that in them is.
What are they doing when they reach that point?
Praising God.
Praising God, acknowledging God, giving credit where credit is due. Do you do that for the shape that you're in when you leave the weight room? Do you do that for the sports team that you're excited about that you've got to share with a family member? Do you do that with the entertainment that you put through your headphones or through your speakers that you've got in your rooms or whatever it may be? Do we do that in the car when we're driving? What are we doing with the voice that God gave us? Are we proclaiming Him? When's the last time that we had a conversation with one of our friends who is not a member of the church about God? When is the last time that we started a conversation with Jesus? Because Jesus wants to start every conversation with you. What are you starting your conversations about? A little bit further into that same area, verse number 25. Who by the Holy Spirit through the mouth of our father David, your servant, said, somebody read this verse for us all the way down through 26.
Why did the heathen rage, and the people imagined vain things? The kings of the earth stood up, and the rulers were gathered together against the Lord and against His Christ.
A little bit more evidence of how factually accurate the Bible really is, of two separate places, years and years apart, coming together for the same purpose. That's the God that we serve. He lines the things up for us, so all we have to do is show the evidence. It's not a difficult thing. So let me ask this question. What would it look like if we were spiritually on fire? What would it look like? Any ideas?
What would it look like Jesus?
It looked like Jesus. What would that look like? I mean, what did Jesus do? What did He talk about? What was He doing when He saw people? What would be different about the way He lived versus how most people in 2022 live today? What do you think?
He said, I came to seek and save that which was lost. And it was His mission. He was devoted.
But I came to sing Rocky Top.
Yeah.
That's what I'm here for. Don't tell me not to, because I mean that orange, man, it's beautiful. So many people don't like it, but you can yell Roll Tide if you want. But Jesus was a volunteer. It's got to be all about the balls, right? Volunteer, yeehaw. I don't even remember the last time I watched a Tennessee football game. I think I missed the whole season last year, and I used to think that I could not live throughout the fall without watching Tennessee play football. But if you lose enough games, you realize you can go without it for a little while, and that's kind of what happened. But you reach a point where things that really mattered lose their value when priorities start to get back in line. You think that you can't live. When I was a kid, I thought I couldn't live without NASCAR. I've got to watch cars go in circles. Because I love speed, I love horsepower, I love watching somebody go as fast as they can. I want to be the one behind the wheel. I love driving my vehicle as fast as I can drive. I love speed. The faster, the better. I don't remember the last time I watched a NASCAR race. Because people started inviting me to their house, and this was evangelism given to me. People started inviting me to their house when the race was on. What am I going to do? Say, I'd rather watch a car go in a circle than fellowship with my brethren? So I had to say, okay, I'll come and have dinner with you, and then I missed the whole race. And after you miss a few, it doesn't really matter anymore. And that stuff just kind of falls to the wayside because there's bigger things in this world than the things we entertain ourselves with. And the things that we think are so valuable, but here's the problem, that can work both directions. If I stay away from Tennessee football long enough, I really don't care if I get to see the game or not. I just like messing with people. If I stay away from NASCAR long enough, it's not really going to matter that much because I start to lose interest and I start blaming it on, well, they changed the car, so it doesn't really matter that much. They got so many rules. It's just the same car, just different people driving them. We can do that to the church. When we start slipping away, the thing about your faith is a priority that you have to create within yourself. God gives you the entire recipe. God gives you this, but you have to choose what's going to be most important to you. As for me and my house, Joshua says, what is he going to do? Serve the Lord. You've got to decide what's going to be normal in your household. When David is walking out onto that battlefield, David's footprints don't make ripples on the cup. Goliath's do. David's fixing to face something much larger than he is. He's going to stay true to who he is so that he can win. And he's going to keep the world out of his head. In what ways does the world challenge us today in trying to take our thoughts? It might not be with that negativity of you're not good enough. Maybe that stuff that the world's trying to put in your head is God's not really that important. Maybe the world agrees, yeah, God exists, but he's not that important. No, nobody cares what kind of word choices you use. Nobody really cares if you pray. Nobody really cares. That's the point. Nobody really cares. But we're not just serving a person. We're serving a creator. We're serving someone that gave us everything that we have. We talk about, it's different people that say, I can do everything that God ever did. I'll build my own house. Yeah, but what materials? I'll make my own stuff. Yeah, but where are you going to get the things to do it with? Well, I'll do that. Yeah, but where did you get your strength and your energy and your ability to do it? I did that myself. No, you didn't. Where did everything come from? And what are we going to do with what we've been blessed with? That's the end of our time this morning. I want to challenge you with that before we get into our worship service, though. What are you going to do? The world will challenge you. Who are you? What are you going to do with it?